started. Hi everyone. This is the waiting family workshop. My name is Melissa O'Mara. I work for one of the contracted agencies, Child and Family Services. I'm up in Torrence, and this is Fredia.
I'm Fredia Torrence, and I work for the Northern Regional. I'm one of the supervisors for the Northern Regional office. We cover 8 area offices in the Northern region, and I have another supervisor that works with me, and we process all of the applications that come in the central office for our 8 catchment areas.
And to the provider agency, which is myself, we're a contract and we work directly with DCF, and we do the exact same job. We home study and license families for adoption. We're just a smaller agency. We do a little overflow sometimes. We have lighter caseloads. I only have 2 family resource workers. So when families need a MAP training and the department maybe doesn't have one available, we MAP train families. We go through the exact same process, and sometimes when families feel like they're looking for something maybe a little bit more, a social worker that's gonna have more time to focus on your specific needs, they might ask to go to a provider agency, say just because caseloads.
Yep. The volume of cases that we have in our northern region is pretty high, which is why we have 2 supervisors and 8 workers. So if we have an overflow and a worker has like way too many home studies, I might call Mel and say, like, can you take a couple?
Yeah.
And then they'll workers will write our home studies.
And then, sorry.
Oh.
And then at the end of the home study process, we really work with you to decide if you want to go back to the department and work with your original social worker, or if you want to stay with one of our workers who did your MAP training and home study. The most important part about the entire process is making sure it's tailored to you and your needs. None of the social workers are possessive. We don't really feel like we work together jointly, and the entire process is about making sure that you guys feel like you have the support you need in your matching process, and then the support you need once you have a child in your home, that you have a social worker that's going to be there for you.
So I can talk a little bit about what happens with our process with DCF. So can everybody hear me? Okay. So we have our 8 workers, and each one is assigned a family. So it would be one of anybody in this room. But they also have a caseload of children that they recruit for as well. So we're visual, and there are a lot of workers coming in and out. So we have a nice big board. So when you're licensed and approved, we put your name on the board, and we would put the age of the child that you're looking for, whether you want a sibling group or not, and so every worker gets to see the families in the unit. So we try to match internally, first, if we can. And then there's always constant emails going back and forth. Every child is registered with MARE with the goal of adoption, who's ready for recruitment. And so we get emails across the state. So we're always finding out about new kids. We're always getting updates on children, so that we're just kind of always in the loop. And then we also work with the contract agencies too. So we're all at matching events and things like that.
Yeah. Our agency, just like the department, we have kids on our caseloads as well. So we do the same kind of overflow for children who are in the waiting process themselves. So I have a group of 4 social workers, and they have children on their caseloads, about 18 each. And so when we're working with a family, we look internally, but then we reach out to the ADLUs, Fredia and her colleagues, to match families. We work collaboratively all the time. We talk to each other a lot to say, like, we have this list of families that are looking and waiting, and this is what they're looking for. And because the ADLU also recruits children, we do a lot of that back and forth, of talking to each other, checking in. We call MARE a lot to say, I have this family, they're looking for this, do you know what's going on? Do you know how many kids match this particular criteria? I'm a big believer in fitting your strengths to a child's needs, and I think that that's the most important thing in what we do. as social workers. So a lot of times families have this picture in their mind that, you know, they walked in the door and they said, you know, I think I want this one child that looks exactly like this. And the more we get to know you, the more we talk to you, and the more we spend time with you, we kind of get to know you guys a little bit. We try to get to know your personalities, your strengths, your needs, and say, you know, I think you're wonderful, and I have heard about this child that I actually think you'd be wonderful parents for. And sometimes it may be a little bit outside of what you were thinking, and sometimes you were looking at one and it may be a sibling group, and I'll say, hey, I think you can handle it, and I think you guys are great. And you know, I think it's an interesting thing sometimes especially when you're part of a couple, that you have different strengths, right? And so it's part of your relationship and how you balance each other out. And sometimes that's why you might end up being great parents for kids with two or three kids with different needs, because, you know, one child might really need a super nurturing mom, while the other child maybe doesn't need that as much, but they really need a supportive, parent who's doesn't have that super huggy-feely type, that's more, you know, the active, running around type of parent. And when we get to know you, we kind of say like, oh, we know that about you. Like, you've got the one parent that's super nurturing, and we've got the one parent that's wicked active and outgoing, and we've got a sibling group where those strengths are really important. And so we might reach up to you and say like, hey, I know you were looking for, you know, a little boy or a little girl of this age, but we found somebody who might fit what you're looking for, but they come with a sibling that I think you'd really be great parents for as well. So that's just something that we talk about a lot. We have these meetings, we have matching meetings that we discussed, where we talk about you guys, where we say, you know, I have this wonderful family. This is what they look like. This is what I think they're great at. This is what they're looking for. And does anyone have a child that might fit? You know, that needs this kind of family. And then, you know, we call you up. There's a lot of, I don't know about Fredia, but I'm a big believer in, if I see something that makes sense, if you call and you say, I want to look into this child, we'll look into it. But I also am a big believer in calling you and giving you opportunities to say yes and no, and you have to feel like you can say no. Because I may throw crazy curveballs at you, because that's what the need is.
Yeah.
We have a very huge shortage of foster parents. We have a shortage of pre-adoptive families. And because of that, we have a lot of kids that suddenly have emergency placement needs. So I might call you guys and say, I know you guys really wanted a long transition and prep time and all that stuff, but I have a kid that needs a placement tomorrow. Would you consider? And they'll all have a sad story, and they'll all be difficult scenarios, and you have to know yourselves really well to be able to say to us, no, I really want to be matched, but that's not the right fit for me in my scenario. Or to take the leap of faith and say, yeah, I think I can do that emergency crazy situation, and let's do it. It's not for everyone, but we will call you and we'll ask, because this is a partnership. Our job as a partnership is that we're working with you and you're working with us to go back and forth and say what's going on in your family, where this situation might work or it might not. And we'll sometimes push you a little bit and say, are you sure? You can't stay a little bit outside your comfort zone with a little bit of support? Because I think everyone can, with the right support, go a little bit outside their comfort zone, but you want to make sure that it's the right fit for you, because you know your family, you know what's going on in your lives day to day, not us. And to be able to say yes and no to us and to the kids' situations is really important part of your process as well.
And after you're licensed, there are opportunities. So, you know, if you don't have children, or you have nieces and nephews that you've babysat for, you know, a short period of time, there's respite. And so that's something that's really important. We have our foster parents who, you know, they have lives, so they have weddings to go to, or there's a death in the family. And so those are a little bit more planned. So we might give you a call and say, like, in a couple of weeks, this foster parent needs respite for the weekend of. And that's just another opportunity, if you don't have children, to be able to kind of get your feet wet, and, you know, get to know a sibling group or a child that needs placement, but on a very temporary basis. Even if you're a pre-adoptive home, so your goal is to adopt, but for a respite situation, you could be a pre-adoptive parent, and it's just a temporary placement. You're a licensed home, so you're able to provide short-term respite care.
Right, it's not exactly foster care, it's not like we're placing a child for foster care with you and there's you know, we don't know when they'll leave and that kind of stuff. Respite is a planned scenario, right? We've got a family that already has a child, go ahead.
So that's more like a babysitting type situation?
Right.
Want to use,
Exactly. You know, a week or two, or maybe a month. I had a wonderful family who was waiting to be matched, and they knew exactly what they were looking for. They wanted a really big sibling group, and they were waiting. And we had 2 little boys who were in between placements. So they needed to leave one foster home, and their pre-adoptive home wasn't going to be ready for about a month because there was a couple of situations going on, and they weren't going to be able to take them. And they thought they were going to have this long transition, but the child's foster parent had an emergency and couldn't wait that month to transition the kids into the home. So that 1 month, they took these 2 little boys, a 4-year-old and a teenager. Totally not what they were thinking, you know, what they were planning for. But it helped them, that 1 month with that sibling group, helped them kind of prepare for when their sibling group of 3 moved into their home. Because they initially were looking at a sibling group of younger kids. And then they had the teenager and they said, okay, well, if we have the 1 little one, I think that we thought it would be really hard to parent 1 little one and an older one. And we were trying to keep them all close together in age, but it was really fun to have like the span in age. And that we really felt like we could do it. So they took a sibling group that ranged from age 3 to 9. And they really had built up some of those skills. They knew how to handle the 3-year-old who had some speech delays because they had done that for about a month with the other child. And they knew some of those preteen drama issues that come along when their 9-year-old moved in, because they were dealing with a 14-year-old who was, you know, drama central, because that's where he was at.
14.
Yeah, because he's 14. Exactly. And so they had that little bit of experience, and they really felt like that helped them prep for their kids, and to take away that anxiety, like, I don't know if I can do this. They're like, well, I did it for a month. Of course I can do this. I did it for a month for children that I knew weren't going to stay. And of course I can do it for the children that are going to be my children. And I think that it's a good starting point for your to handle anxieties and to prep and to just kind of get a little bit of experience under your belt sometimes. Other important things is that in the waiting process, I think the waiting parent support group is so important because it's frustrating. You guys have been waiting to be parents for so long, right? So it's before you even started to talk to DCF, before you even started to talk to an agency, you started the journey of talking about wanting to be parents. Do we want to do private adoption? Do we want to try this? Do we want to try that? You've had this long journey before you even set foot into MAP training. So by the time you go through MAP training and you get home studied, you're already exhausted by waiting. And it's frustrating. So it's really important to sit with other families and kind of strategize with other people who are going through the process with you. And to talk about like, well, I've tried this and this was helpful, and hey, I heard about this situation, it maybe wasn't right for me, but I think it might be right for you guys. And it's a good way to start your community, because once you have a placement, you're gonna want other families that have gone through what you've been through to be there as your supports. So I'm sure some of you have picked up friends at MAP. The waiting parent support group is another place to pick up friends that are going through the same process. And over time, I think that what we find is in the waiting parent support group, it starts off with a bunch of people who are frustrated by the process, and they have options to learn and train with different techniques. Sometimes they have lawyers that come and speak to the waiting parent group, they have other foster parents, they have trainers that come in and talk about trauma and different things. And over time, that group becomes a little bit cohesive, and you end up getting matched around the same times, and then you have a whole new set of support to come with you when you've got placement.
Right. And everybody's journey is different. So if you're, waiting for an infant, you might wait a little longer than somebody's waiting for like a school-aged child, which is really like what our need is.
Right.
But it's also, you have your family, but not everybody understands when you have a child that has like a trauma history. So it's great to be able to have that network where people literally understand what you're going through, the waiting process, and then having a child in your home that might have, some issues, emotional, behavioral, whatever. It's important to be able to connect with people that really understand what you're going through. So we have trainings, while you're waiting, that's probably like the hardest part, I think, of the whole process, because you're applying, you're going through the MAP training, you're like always doing something, the home study, you're getting references, so you're always busy and doing stuff, and then you're approved, and then it's like, okay, now what? Like, no, what's happening? What's happening to my home study? Who's helping me? Like, what are you guys doing? Right. So connect with your worker, call, email. Trust me, they're working hard for you. For the department, they have so many families that they're doing. I mean, they're I don't want to say overworked, but they kind of are. But we're an extension of that. So even though you have your worker, you have us as a supervisor too. So I encourage families, call me, because your worker might be in Greenfield at a disclosure meeting, but I'm available. So, trust that your worker is working for you. Always call a supervisor if you need help. And, we can give you advice on, what to do in terms of like the matching process. We're always meeting quarterly with the contracted agencies, the supervisors, so we're always kind of like matching and talking about the kids that we have, talking about the families that we have.
We might not always tell you what's going on,
Yeah.
because I think that sometimes it can be devastating to kind of feel like your home study's been sent out 15 times and you haven't been matched. So I think that sometimes what we do is we say, there's a child that we know is gonna have a high volume of home studies, so we're maybe not gonna call you and tell you we're sending you out unless you're picked. And sometimes that can sound like the crickets, that can feel like crickets, like, oh, I haven't heard from anyone. But your home study's been being sent out. Because nobody wants you to start to feel exhausted by the process either, because there are so many children, but we also want to make sure that we're making the right matches for everyone to make it successful. I think that with what we do, it's important to have constant communication with your worker, to let them know when you're feeling like, oh, we're not connecting enough, or I need something more from you. Because in the reality is, once you have a placement, your social worker is going to prioritize you, because you have a child and they want to make that successful. So they're going to be your resource worker. They're going to be coming out to your house, talking to you about your stressors, spending hours at your home, at your kitchen table with some coffee, and dealing with panic and stress and all the other stuff that you're dealing with. But then that can feel like someone doesn't have time for you when you're in the waiting and matching process. But you'll really appreciate that dedication once you have the match, right? But your worker is not going to know that you're feeling isolated and ignored if you're not talking.
Yep.
So you really need to be on top of that communication and that relationship. And again, like Fredia said, that's what supervisors are for. We're in the office. Our job is to be in the office so that when the worker is out in the field doing that field work that is so important, you still have a go-to when you need information, or when you have a situation, you're like, I can't reach my worker and I haven't been able to reach her for like a whole week. That seems like a really long time to you guys, but for us, sometimes you don't come into the office for a week. You're out in the field for a week. But the supervisors are supposed to be here in the office, waiting for you and to support you and to make those contacts and connections. So never feel like you're going over someone's head to call a supervisor.
Sometimes I've like made matches because
Oh,
I've,
yeah.
I've spoken to people. People need more, you know, connection and need to feel that, and there are other people that are, but there are, you know, I get to know people that call, and email, so then I'm like, oh, okay, so I've talked to her like 15 times, guess what, I think I have a match. So then I'm invested too, so it's, you're not overstepping.
Or a plan.
Yeah.
You know, that says, you know, we're gonna touch base, you know, every other week.
Right.
And we're gonna talk about how many times we've sent your home study out, and how many kids you've looked at, and how many social workers you've tried to reach, but they haven't reached you back.
Right.
Because that's reality too, is as much as the social workers are with their children, they're also doing case management work. So that means they're in the field
Yeah.
on 90% of their time.
Yeah.
Which makes it really hard to match with families when 90% of your time is in the field and not actually at your desk,
Yeah.
returning emails or phone calls.
So having a plan, that's perfect. It's like, I'm gonna call you the first Monday of every month, so we can check in and go over what you've done, or, you know what I mean? Maybe that will work.
And if you want to have the conversation about going to a contract agency, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
You talk to the supervisor at where you're at. You can speak to some of the contract agencies, see if they have availability to take new families, because they try to keep their caseloads low for the purpose of being more, you know, being there to pick up the overflow in caseload, so that we don't like to be overloaded, so then we're not as helpful to the department if we're overloaded.
Yep.
But you know, if there's an agency that has availability to take on new families, and your area office, you've talked to your area office about it, and they think it makes sense to make the switch, we're a team. Like that's the whole point of all of this, is we're a team. It should always be a conversation. So I think maybe it's.
Can I just ask one other question though?
Sure.
This is a little bit off topic of the waiting process, but is the shortage of social workers, is it like you don't have enough positions to hire people, or are there not enough social workers to hire, or, because I feel like we've gotten the same thing where they are supposed to have 20 caseloads and they have 60. So like, is this something, and then you see Charlie Baker saying he's gonna give all this money to adoption agencies, and so I'm wondering, like, is it like a political thing, like, in all honesty? Because I look on like the employment and I see there's multiple social worker positions, so like, is that where the shortage is? You can't get good social workers to work for DCF, or?
So I'd say we're a protective agency, so workers that are in the field in the front lines dealing with protective cases, that's a lot where the funding goes. That's where like this is just me talking. That's where the need is to protect children from abusive situations.
Yeah.
The adoption part is a section of the department. So yes, we do get monies allocated for us, but I think the bulk of that money is probably to stabilize and work with families to keep them together. And then, you know, we get money to hire, so more social workers. So when I first started supervising this unit, I think there were like 4 or 5 workers in the unit, and so because I'd been a worker in the unit, and the supervisor before me, just, you know, we just kind of keep advocating for ourselves and advocating. So now we're up to 8, and I think every week I say we need more workers, more workers to my management staff, and they know it, and it's a process, right?
And the reality is, there's turnover. As much as we want to say that we're constantly trying to feed the beast of social work, it's a really hard job. And like I said, you're in the field 90% of the time, but 90% of your job is supposed to be in the office. So you're never up to speed. And that's a really hard place to be when you're dealing with children's lives and huge issues about children's lives, where they're going to be, are they safe? And it's exhausting, and people leave. And then you have to hire new people and retrain, and that's a whole process. So I think that that's one of the issues that is happening, which is why it's okay to go to talk to supervisors. It's okay to even talk to contracted agencies, because that's the whole point, is we all know that we're in an overloaded system, and we're there to try to work out different strategies and different ways to support each other, because it's all about the kids.
So why don't I start talking? I'm one of you. I'm a family. We adopted It was the single greatest thing that we ever did in my family. Everyone would agree. My name is Kim Cavanaugh. I am a mother, I am a teacher, we adopted, I am currently mentoring through a program in DCF, a 17-year-old boy who's in foster care. We're actually, it's not me, we're a family mentor, my whole family. We adopted when my oldest was in college. My middle child was in high school, and we wanted a teenager. And, is anybody scared? Anybody scared? Yes. It's scary. The whole thing is scary. The whole process is scary, starting from exactly what you said. When you do this process, it takes a long time. If I told you how long our process was, you would say, geez, I don't know if I'm going to do this. I mentor families. I have, for about 5 years, mentored families who are going through the adoption process. And it's usually through email. Right now I have one family. I've been with them for almost 2 years. I had a couple other families before that, and they were always to the point of, I can't do this anymore. We just can't do this. My husband says that this is it, we're done. If we don't get a match in the next 2 months, we're gonna stop. And I just, over and over again, particularly the last 2 families, I'm like, please don't stop, because it will happen. And both of those families did not stop. They both got placed. One family with a little girl, my family that I'm still close to right here in Worcester, they wanted, and these were specific, under 2 years old. Very hard for a placement under 2 years old.
Right.
But they had 2 boys, that's what they wanted. I'm usually matched with people who already have biological children, because you know, it's a different scene when you already have biological children, to incorporate the whole process into your family. And so my last family, they wanted a girl under 2. And they said to me last spring, it's usually the mom, to tell you the truth. I'm usually talking to the mom. Sometimes the dad gets on the email chain and they see everything that the mom and I talk about. But it has never been the dad asking me questions, but the dad's there in the background. I don't know how that happens, but that's what happens. But anyhow, last year they both said to me, we're gonna stop in the summer. We're gonna take a break. We just can't do this anymore. We're not being presented with any children. And I said, oh, please don't do that. Don't take a break over the summer, because that will just delay the whole thing. So they said, okay. They were placed with a year-old child. She is now turned 2. She is an at-risk child. Her adoption will probably take a long time to actually happen. That was unknown to them. It's very, very difficult. They go to court. Sometimes they don't go to court. It will take a long time. They didn't know that. Those are all of that's like one of the scary things, the unknown. First of all, you don't have a child. Then secondly, you get a child, and you get that child, and you have, oh my gosh, this child has to have visits. Oh wow, they have to have visits. Oh, now I have to meet the parents of this child. Oh, that's so scary. And then so to go back to this family, not only did they have the little girl who's now in their home, and now they're like kind of chilled that they know it's going to take a long time for the adoption to happen. But they just got called by a worker and said, they decided to do foster care in addition. And they got called by a worker and said, you know, we have a sibling group, 2 girls. Are you interested? She said, yes, we are interested. And now they have, this is 1 year later, now they have a family of 5. Now, could I do that? No, we only wanted one daughter, but I support her. I talk to her every solitary week. So if you don't have someone to talk to, you can find someone to talk to. I had my own mentor. She adopted a teenage girl, and she was my lifeline. Did I ever meet her? No, I never met her. I just emailed her with every question I could come up with, and it made me feel better.
And Maren, your family resource worker, will help you get a mentor. Mentor families are the greatest resource because they've been through the fire. They've gone through the tunnel and they've gotten out the other side. So we love to match people who understand with people who are in the beginning and who are struggling through the process. Because the process is really hard. It's really, really hard.
So this is how long it took us, just so you know. I said to my husband, I really think I want to adopt. He's like, what? I did not know that. I said, yes, I've always wanted to do this ever since I was really young. And I said, and now we have, I got very nervous when my oldest went to college. I was like, oh no, they're really gonna leave me. I don't want my kids to leave me. She has really left me. She's in Chicago, so she's now 28. And it took a little bit of getting used to, but he came around and said, okay, so there's the first letter, right? You write the first form. You do the first form. So that was probably in the beginning of 1 year I did it. So probably February, March, the first form. And then you get back, someone comes to your house, right? They come to your house to check out your house. And then after that, you have to sign up for the classes. So we signed up for the classes in the summer, and my daughter was a biopsych major, so she just loved this. So she came to all the classes with us. My other daughter, she just said, you know what, Mom, our family is very good the way it is, and I have no idea why you're doing this. And she acted that way pretty much until she went to college. This is after our daughter moved in. She pretty much acted that way. So we went to classes, so we finished classes, and then in the fall, we took one of our daughters to an adoption event. And we went to this event, and we were just all undone. We're like, oh my gosh, we have to go to an event, we have to stare at these children, and we're supposed to be looking for our child. It was, to us, it was a rainy day, it was a small event, it wasn't a big event, and I have been to all the big events. I came here to this event after we had been licensed. And so after that event, I said to my husband, I don't know, this is just really overwhelming. I'm not sure if I can really do this. So we said, okay, let's take a break. So then we took a break. We said, we're gonna take the fall off. And we called our social worker and we told her, we said, this is kind of stressful. We're gonna take a little break. And then after the new year, we had a new plan. This was our plan. We were gonna go to every adoption event we could think of to get used to the idea, to be more comfortable, to feel good about it, and be more relaxed about it. And that's what we did. So we finished the home study. So we weren't probably done, we probably didn't finish the home study until sometime in the spring. We were probably late spring. We were finally done with everything. So now we're sitting there, and I'm sitting in the same spot you're sitting, like, where's the child? How come no one's calling us? So from the spring until maybe Christmas, we actually had one disclosure meeting, and we were kind of specific. We wanted a teenager girl. But along the way, we got very frustrated and said, okay, a boy will be fine, because we just want a child. And so we had one disclosure on a girl, but actually, and And this is to tell you, this is not in any disrespect to DCF, but things happen. They brought us to a disclosure meeting as just as a kind of a pawn because they had another family for this child. And we were not told this until after it was all done. And we never would have gone to the disclosure meeting if we had known that. But things happen. You know this. Things happen. Not for whatever reason. So after that, we were pretty disappointed. But then we got called for a boy. And in those days, you had to go to the library to look up
the big blue book.
the big blue, yes. And now you get to look at it online. We went to the library and I looked up this boy because they were offering us a disclosure meeting for him. And I flip him through, and I see this girl. And I said, geez, I've never seen this girl before. So I went home, and what you would do then, which is similar, I think, today. You go in and you say you're interested.
Yep.
And then it flips to whoever the adoption worker is. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I went in, I said I was interested in her, and her adoption worker called me about 2 hours later and was whispering on the phone, and she said, I'm not supposed to do this, but I have been waiting for you. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I saw all of your information, and I have a child that I think would be a match for you. And I said, well, my social worker never told me about this child. And she said, well, I contacted your social worker, but there's some things in her background that you said no to. I said, oh, okay. Well, she said, so why don't you contact your social worker, and then she'll contact me, and then we'll see what we can do. So that's what happened, and that was in December. So that's the spring, now it's December, and I talked to my social worker, and this is a really important little bit of information. So everybody fills out that piece of paper that says what you're willing to accept.
Yeah, the one-page profile.
Right. So we filled it out. We were perfectly serious about what it was that we thought we could accept. And there was something on that profile that we said no to, that once the social worker explained to me her life and what her past was, and she said, I really think this would be a great match. Let's just talk some more about it. So we did. We had some phone conversations, and she said, and this is one of the most important little pieces, if you get called about someone, ask to speak to the foster mom or dad. Okay, because that was like when I spoke to her foster mom, I was like, yes, I think we want to meet this child. So we met her, we actually met her, we said yes, and we met her in January, and then by February she was coming to our house. And then by June she had moved in. So how long did that take? That took a long time. That's almost 2 years of, right? Almost 2 years of the process. But the waiting part was less than that.
It's stressful.
Yes, it's stressful, but I think the best thing to do is to keep yourself busy during the waiting period. And to, go ahead.
So you didn't go to that second disclosure meeting, is that right?
With the boy?
Yeah.
No, we did not, because just as we said no. You can say no.
Yeah.
I mean, there was something in his that we said, no, we don't think we can handle. There were different things in his background that we didn't think we could handle, so we said no to it. You don't have to say yes to every disclosure meeting.
And it's not a strike against you to say no,
No.
like you know yourselves and what you can and cannot handle. You know, the worker is just, your guide, but it's okay to say no.
Yeah, you're not gonna be blacklisting Yep.
What kind of information do you get in order to decide if you want to continue with the disclosure meeting?
So every office is a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so the whole point is to make sure that you ask the questions you feel like you want to know to feel comfortable going to the next level. And the social worker is going to try to give you like the summary, you know, a general summary without all the nitty-gritty details, because we don't need to give you all the nitty-gritty details on every kid unless you want to move forward to the next step. But I think one of the things that is really important to know is that the more specific you are in what you're looking for, the longer you're gonna wait. Because if you have to imagine it, it's like the child that you're looking for might not actually be in the system yet. I mean, that's just the reality. We just placed 3 kids. And when we did the match, we realized all the bouncing around they did. The family that they're in right now, they weren't there when the kids were in need of placement. So they bounced around. And now that family's approved, and at the right time that the kids need placement. And it's just this moment, like you're trying to shoot for these moments when the right kid, the right fit is available, when you're available, and the more narrow your search, the harder it is to catch that moment, right?
And that was a family, is that my, yeah, because.
I love them.
Okay.
I'm happily.
And it's one of those things where, yeah, like they weren't even approved for, they were approved for a certain amount, like for 2. They could have done 3 children, but it was like on a case-by-case basis. So we were just kind of crossing our fingers and like, I think they can do it. But the ink wasn't dry on their homestudy. And then all of a sudden it was like, so they could move 3? Oh, like, really? But they're in there.
They're in there.
And they're doing well.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, is it harder on your end to place children with families that already have youngish biological children, or because of it's more variable sort of, or does that not?
I think it all depends on the kids. I mean, what people forget is these kids are going into foster homes where none of this stuff is happening. You know, it's like emergency placements, we're putting kids in homes, whatever's available. And those kids are dropped in as middle kids, they're dropped in as older kids, they're dropped in as younger kids. They're out of birth order, there's kids you never planned for. And that's how social workers get to know if a child can handle other kids. And if they're in a home with other kids, then they're probably gonna be okay in a home with other kids. So I don't see that as a barrier. Sometimes I think that's a benefit, because sometimes it's easier for kids to connect with other kids than it is to connect with parents. So sometimes having kids is actually a benefit.
That's so true, because my 3 daughters, they just talk behind my back all the time. You know what Mom did today?